Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us to share your perspectives and to listen to one another as we consider how we worship in a post-COVID world. Union Congregational Church, at its core, is a relational congregation. Our worship provides our North Star, where we deepen those relationships within ourselves, with our God, with one another, and with the world beyond our walls. We are blessed to be part of a congregational system that empowers us with both the right and the responsibility to help shape this relational framework. From time to time, we need to check the relational quality of our worship. Now is one of those times. To that end, the goal of the Worship Transition Task Force is to create a process that engages the congregation in exploring our current worship, its practices, music, use of technology, and space. Our church has evolved over centuries. At Union, we've experienced many changes since the cornerstone was laid in 1899. More than 2 decades ago, we became an open and affirming congregation. We have women and LGBTQ clergy. National flags are no longer in the sanctuary. The definition of who can serve and receive communion has changed. And the physical appearance of the sanctuary has evolved. The walls are cream. The trim around the windows is dark. The communion table was moved away from the wall so that people could gather around it. 5 years ago, if you were in a wheelchair, you were forced to worship around the edges of the congregation. We changed that modestly by removing portions of a few pews. Now you can sit among other worshipers and feel more included. These are just a few of the changes we've introduced over the decades. Through it all, we have survived, even thrived, sometimes after intense conversation and strong disagreement. Early in this century, the UCC embarked on an identity campaign, God is Still Speaking, where we acknowledged that God's revelation continues even into our lifetime. How should we respond? Reverend John Thomas, UCC's general minister and president at the time, coined the phrase extravagant hospitality, which became a core element in UCC's mission. The pandemic has added urgency to Thomas's invitation, thrusting upon us a qualitatively new reality. We hold meetings remotely. We don't congregate in person. We worship on Zoom. Hugs and hearty handshakes are no longer how we greet each other. And yet, Union Church continues to thrive. In the process, we've learned a lot about ourselves, our God, and our world, and we're about to learn more. As the pandemic ever so slowly winds down, we will soon be able to return to in-person worship. How do we prepare? There will be new issues, new questions. How will we respond to that moment? How will we offer a worship experience that shapes Union's future? Accessibility is a word you may have heard in relation to worship at Union. The word challenges us to consider how others feel welcomed and inspired at our services. How do newcomers relate to our worship? If people need hearing assistance or large type bulletins, we assume they will read the fine print and ask. But will they? How do people experience our music? Do our traditions, meaningful to many of us, connect or distance others from a spiritual experience? We can take our language for granted, liturgy, offering, doxology, benediction, but such insider language can be a barrier. We can no longer assume that people entering the church have been raised in the church, much less in a UCC congregation. These are some examples of what many of us take for granted that may be inaccessible to others. Our goal in these discussions is to engage you in exploring how we align our worship with our values and statement of purpose in a way that is understandable and meaningful for everyone. In our conversations, we'll reflect on why and how we worship, articulate what is precious to us, create space for new imaginings, and explore how our worship equips us to live out our Christian values in a hurting world. In the process, we can gain deeper appreciation for the diverse worship experiences in our community. Jesus summarizes the law by saying we should love God and love our neighbor. The key question for our faith: how does our worship empower us to follow this summary of the law? What elements of the service help us better love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength? How can we improve these worshipful moments? And how does our worship compel us to love our neighbor? Matthew 25 reminds us that we are to reach out to the least of these, the hungry, the homeless, the marginalized, the oppressed. When you leave worship, which elements of the service lead you to feel more inspired, more equipped, and better committed to being the healing presence of Jesus Christ in our world? And what does Scripture say about this moment? As we slowly emerge from a painful year of isolation, social distancing, and Zoom worship, the prophet Isaiah spoke during a time of exile with words of encouragement. We have been in a time of exile ourselves, from family, friends, daily routines, the sanctuary where we worship. Isaiah said, "Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old, for I am about to do a new thing. Watch it spring forth. Do you not perceive it?" In this historical moment, how do we integrate the ancient words of Isaiah with the current claim of our denomination that God is still speaking to us today, to discover new forms of worship that touch both our intellect and our imagination and lead us to action? So we ask two things of you: your participation and your patience. Participation by sharing your thoughts today and in the additional opportunities we'll offer to help us shape our own future. And patience for the inevitable missteps, awkward moments, and cumbersome segues that we'll experience along the way. If we can pursue this transition with gratitude for our congregational system and generosity of spirit for everyone's best intentions, we can deepen our relationships and become an even stronger congregation moving forward. Thank you so much.